Now we are seeing repeatedly the United States resorting to armed conflicts for quote humanitarian reasons, to defend human rights, to preserve democracy. We saw that in Serbia, in Libya, in Syria, and we see the U.S. government agencies like the National Endowment for Democracy, or U.S. government-funded agencies, USAID, now headed by Samantha Powers, the champion of humanitarian intervention. Could you talk about how the United States basically funds civil society groups in various countries to foment opposition to governments that it is opposed to?
You know, Juan, I just reported a story from Haiti, which is undergoing a major set of protests. These protests have been going on for the past 4 years, getting very little attention around the world. People are on the streets, they are desperate. Fuel prices have gone up, escalated beyond belief, and there's been no commentary about this. Well, ever since the assassination of the head of government, Mr. Joyce's Manuel, ever since his assassination, Ariel Henry has been placed on in the government by the United States. I mean, he was effectively put there by the so-called core group led by the US. But it's interesting when you look at his own record. He emerged in the struggle against Jean-Bertrand Aristide. You know, Mr. Aristide needs to be in the Guinness Book of World Records because he's the only world leader I know who has been couped twice by the United States. When Mr. Aristide, attempting desperately to produce a social democratic policy for Haiti, a country which had the first revolution in the Americas, a real proletarian revolution, the first major revolution, it was strangled by the French. In fact, until the 1950s, Haiti had to pay indemnity for what? For the people who had freed themselves, for quote-unquote the slaves. Well, Mr. Aristide was trying to drive a good policy and so on. Ariel Henry was funded by the International Republican Institute and the National Endowment for Democracy in the United States. Many of the actors who came into the anti-Aristide movement were financed by the United States government. And then eventually when people like Ariel Henry, who fashions himself as a neurosurgeon, but in fact is a pawn of the United States government, when they came into positions of high office, they NGOized Haiti. I mean, Haiti is a bastion of NGOs. They went along with the Obama administration to prevent the rise of minimum wage. At the time, the US Embassy in Port-au-Prince said, well, you know, we shouldn't raise the minimum wage because then essentially the unwashed will get money. Well, that unwashed then went into gangs. Many of those gangs are in some ways the only organized force in Haiti. I mean, look at the destruction that so-called humanitarian intervention brought to Haiti. You don't have to go far from the United States to see it. You don't have to go to Iraq, or you don't have to go to Libya, countries destroyed by US wars in the name of democracy. I mean, when are people going to come to understand you can't bring democracy by warfare? You have to negotiate with people. You have to let people develop their own dignified histories. You can't bully countries into doing things. And by the way, there's no credibility for this, because let's face it, at the same time that the United States said that, oh, we're going to go to war in Libya to prevent an atrocity which later Amnesty International found, you know, hadn't happened. That was an entire hoax. At the same time as the United States was saying that, its principal ally in that conflict was in the Gulf, was Saudi Arabia and Qatar, where there are atrocities every day against working people, against people who come from South Asia, from the Philippines and so on. There's no concern about these workers who have to hand over their passport, get treated in a form of modern day slavery. No concern about that. Where's the credibility irony in this. It's striking that people in the United States seem to fall into this trap over and over again, having faith in a government that feeds you the lie that it's out there to promote democracy through warfare. You want to see the detritus of this again? Look at what's happening in Haiti. There's very little avenue out of this crisis for the Haitian people. And one of the elements, by the way, of this crisis is the US pressure campaign on Venezuela, because Venezuela, through the scheme called Petrocaribe, was providing Haiti with cut-price energy. And because of the pressure campaign on Venezuela, Petrocaribe essentially fell apart, and Haiti has not been able to get the kind of energy it requires. So, I mean, it's quite clear, if you look at the evidence, that these wars in the name of democracy or these wars in the name of humanitarian intervention simply don't add up. Talk to the Haitians, talk to the Afghans, and you'll understand how they see it.
Noam Chomsky, I wanted to ask you about peace movements, or the absence of peace movements. During the Vietnam War, during the Iraq War, there were vibrant peace movements in the United States. But now during this war in Ukraine, even the most left-wing representatives in Congress and the Senate, whether it's Bernie Sanders, AOC, and others, have basically gone along with continuing to finance and pursue this the support of this war in Ukraine. Your sense of the absence of a peace movement right now in the U.S.?
First of all, we should be realistic about the peace movement in Vietnam and Iraq. In the case of Vietnam, it took years to develop any kind of a peace movement. By the time the significant peace movement had developed by 1967, South Vietnam, which had been was always the main target of attack, had been practically destroyed to the point where the leading specialist on the topic, Bernard Fall, who was no dove incidentally, warned that Vietnam may not survive as a cultural and historical entity under the most severe attacks that any country that size has ever suffered. By that time, you began to get a peace movement. Not much in Congress, incidentally, very little, and certainly not much among the great intellectual community. In fact,